with this time. I'll just move it back here, at least out of the way. Got the big smell.
Smell it. Are there as many seats? Doesn't feel like there are.
Even light. Yeah, bring it. I guess.
All the hags look
Stay
alike.
away, stay away, don't follow me there.
Paul's a good guy. He was my coach. I played football for that.
Danny DeVito's characters. I'm afraid. Oh, that's pretty
I think did a nice job.
good. I don't mean
It
to
looks great.
interrupt. I'm Brian Powell.
Hey, Brian, Jason, man, good to put a face with a name and a
Absolutely.
voice.
Yep, and thank you for being understanding from before.
Oh, yeah, man, that was on me. That was on me. It's not you at all. It's
I
all.
appreciate it. So if, like I said, if there's anything that I can do to help facilitate the meetings, I'm happy to do. I just sent an email literally like 50 minutes ago. For locations for the
Yeah.
public comment
Okay,
periods.
good.
So hopefully we can get that ironed out and then we can
Yeah.
give them some dates.
Who'd you send that to?
To the four principals for PRP, Ballard, Atherton, Southern High School. That's what Earl had given me.
Yeah, we need to probably do one
He said a 15
West End.
That's what his recommendation.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
As long as,
He was gonna do Central High School, and I said, well, the proximity central
Yeah.
to, and then this.
I'm gonna go with whatever Corey thinks on that.
Okay,
Because that's his
we
area.
really haven't deferred to him. I was the one who just made the
Yeah.
judgment call to Mr. Jones, so I can ask him.
Yeah, the only thing I think to Corey is because it's
Of course.
his area.
Right.
So it doesn't matter to me. So
Okay.
PRP,
PRP, Ballard, Atherton, and Southern, and then City Hall. So I mapped it out, I was like, yeah, I agree. I think that's probably pretty good for the five,
you should
so.
find Ballard, because it's in my district.
Fair enough.
About if I come to your area,
All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the February 17th meeting to order. First thing we'll do is call roll, and when we call roll, if you remember which committee you're on, report that. If you don't, that's okay, just because we can go back through my records. So you can call roll.
Co-Chair Representative Jason Nemus,
Here, services.
Co-Chair Earl Jones, Senator Gerald Neal, Senator Julie Rocky Adams, Senator Mike Nemes,
Here, taxes.
Representative Ken Fleming, Representative Pamela Stevenson, Councilmember Anthony Piagentini, council member Jacory Arthur.
Present.
Do you remember your committee, sir? Committee or council member Cindy Fowler,
I guess taxes.
Marilyn Butler, Mary Ann Butler. Marcy, sorry, ma'am.
Hi, I'm here and I'm on taxes.
Shelby Williams Somerville,
Here, tax.
Scott Schoenberg,
Here, gaps.
Mayor Johnny Jung,
Here, services.
Sean Dreisbeck. Councilman Arthur, did you list your committee that you're on, sir?
It should have been about the gaps in services.
Thank you.
And I know Senator Neal is on services. So Councilman Arthur's on the gaps.
And you have 11 members present in a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, we want to welcome Ms. Fowler, this is her first official meeting with the group. She was at the meeting last month in St. Matthews, but we didn't have quorum for that meeting, so this is the first official one. So I think I want to start off while our co-chair is coming up the stairs. I want to start off with, if we could, a report on the tax committee that has met a number of times, and the other committees will be meeting in the next month for their inaugural meeting. So I don't know, Representative Fleming, if you want to give a brief rundown of the kinds of things that you guys have been discussing.
Sure, thank you, Chairman. I'm Ken Fleming, the 48th District. And yeah, we have met a couple times, and we're in a sort of data collection process. Obviously, we hadn't have official contract with Dr. Coombs and his team, but we have had a couple conversations in terms of giving some directions and thoughts on what we are looking at and what we're trying to achieve and so forth. I know he's gotten some information, still a whole lot more information to collect. But we try to get some guidelines in terms of what we anticipate seeing in terms of the tax structure coming from different revenue streams within the urban, the old urban area and the metro area outside of the urban services district, as well as suburban cities. So it is a complex lines that we have to look through. I know Dr. Coombs and his team will do a good job. So that's what it is in a nutshell. We don't have any hard data or anything to report as far as giving some trends or some indication on where things are starting to settle down in terms of how things are shaking out. But anyway, we've met, and like I said, in a consultation in terms of where we think things should be going in general terms.
Any other comments from any committee member of the tax committee? All right. Okay, I also want to note, I think this is our first official meeting since the new mayor has been sworn in. And personally, I want to say a lot of thanks to him and his administration for being very helpful in getting some of the things accomplished that we were trying to get accomplished, for being accommodating and easy to approach and talk with. And so he's helped our work already in his very short tenure as our city's mayor. One of those things that he was able to get accomplished in no time that we were struggling with is to finalize the contract that with Mr. Coombs, which will take the majority of our meeting discussing our discussions with him and so forth. So anyway, I see that David Kaplan is here. I think David is the chief of staff for the mayor. And so welcome, Mr. Kaplan, to the meeting. And I see Mr. Jerry McGraw, who's a citizen. Mr. Kaplan, I don't know if you have any remarks that you want to make, but we welcome them if you would like.
Sorry about my video here, was having trouble with. No, just pleased to be in attendance. The work of the task force is important, and we're certainly interested in the outcome and want to be as helpful and supportive as we can, making sure that the Coombs team gets all the data that they need.
Thank you. All right, I guess we're going to just get right into it. Mr. Coombs, would you like to start the conversation?
So joining me today is Professor Bill Hoyt. He's a University of Kentucky economist with a long, deep history in public finance. And he's a real expert on this in theory and in practice. And also Matt Ruther, Dr. Matt Ruther just showed up. He's the Kentucky State demographer, and he's also the point person at University of Louisville for the contract. And Matt has already generated a tremendous amount of basic demographic data for this study that we will be sharing with you soon. So, and I'll echo what a couple of you just said. The administration has been very helpful. David James' office, Jenny First, have been pointing me to the correct people. We've met at MetroSafe, and they are in the process of providing us all the run data for fire districts, the police, and EMS. And it was a wonderful meeting, and they jumped right on it. I met yesterday with Greg Brown at Public Works, and same thing. It was a wonderful meeting. He's generating street level data on all road projects in the county, and we'll be able to aggregate it up however you like, and plus the sanitation department data. So we're off and running. Another one that we've locked in is the Uniform Financial Information Reports. I don't know if these UFA reports, every city and county in Kentucky is required to file these each year, and it's a standard thing with lots of details on revenues and expenditures. And we've now acquired all of it from 2007 through fiscal year 2021, each year on all of the 83 cities in Jefferson County. So we have a pretty good detailed history of revenues and expenditures for all the cities. And just last week, I actually was able to track down one from before merger, 2002. So we'll be able to see a before and after on how municipal governments have been raising and spending money. So all of that stuff is in the bank. You know, there's some data massage problems, missing entries, you know, the usual data analysis problems that we're working through. But as soon as we're happy with the quality of it, and that can be soon in some of these cases, we'll be sharing it with you as appropriate. So that's what we've done. Our plan is, as I've told several folks that I've talked to informally, who are worried about deadlines, because we're basically 6 months behind where I thought we would be when we were first approached. I do think we can give you plenty of compelling data for you to make policy recommendations on by August, September, whatever your deadline is. If you want us to go into every rabbit hole in Metro Council's budget and tell the story of where the money comes from and where it's being spent, it might take years. I mean, there's hundreds, as you all know better than me, of programs in there that we could go in the weeds and tell stories about. So all I know to do from a practical management point of view, if we've got, say, 6 months to do the work, we're going to take the biggest things, the things that you consider the most important, the things that are the biggest things in the budget. So that means on the revenue side, it's property taxes, it's occupational taxes, it's insurance premium taxes, et cetera. On the expenditure side, it's going to be police, fire, EMS, roads, sanitation, corrections, the obvious things. So that's sort of from our point of view, what we're going to be busy doing the next month or two is going down in those major revenue and expenditure items, getting them loaded up from a geographic point of view so we can tell stories about which part of the county is generating the money, which part of the county is receiving the services, and come to your committees and tell those stories. So that's kind of our plan. And as I've also told several folks here, consider us your research department. So if you have policy issues that are just burning, where you need as quickly as possible to get empirical measures to make your judgments on, please tell us, and we'll prioritize. I mean, you're the ones that have to ultimately make the policy recommendations, right? Not us. So we're here to be your research department. So that, I think, Bill, do you have anything to say, or Matt? No?
Yeah, Jones here. Sorry for being late, by the way. Professor Coombs, sorry, I missed some of your presentation. If you made a point about, I heard your comment about revenues, the expenditures, where they're coming from and where the revenues coming, where expenditures are going. Have you addressed the question of what you're comparing? In words, I noticed in the contract, there were discussions about what years were being compared to. For example, what's a normal year? The expenditures, the information that you're gathering is for what fiscal period? And therefore, what are you comparing that to in order to make some sort of a judgment, I guess, about what is against which we can make a judgment, I suppose, against what is fair or equitable?
Sure. So our attitude is get everything that's publicly available and easy to get and vacuum it in. And in some cases, we will have annual data from before merger all the way up to fiscal 2022 through last June. In a lot of these silos, we have that data, the occupational tax data, the insurance premiums tax data. We already have that loaded up every year. And then we'll come up with allocation mechanisms to tell the story. In some cases, for example, I suspect the data that we're getting from MetroSafe on fire and police and EMS, they're going to give us a recent snapshot, say, for the last year. Now, to go back and get it before merger, I'm not sure it's feasible that it even exists. We'll try. I always want the before and the after. Before merger, I mean, that's what we're here for, right? What's changed since merger? So in every case, we're going to try to get a before and an after. And to the extent the data is available, we're going to get the whole movie and see how it evolved over the last 20 years. So it's going to just depend on the subject and the data that are available.
Mr. Chair, Anthony Piagentini, just to add, just for Dr. Coombs and your team, one of the things that will be a practical issue, and I'm sure the administration will brief you on this as they start to pull data, is in some cases we changed reporting systems over time, right? I know I'll just pick on one, probably not going to impact your analysis, but it was something that I had asked for a little while ago, and that was data on pulling housing permits, right? And the city changed that system 4 years ago. So they were able to pull the last 4 years in a blink of an eye, but going beyond that required a lot of manual work. So, I think that's something, in each of your meetings with the different department heads, I'm sure they can give you some insight into that. But those are some of the practical issues you run into. And to your point, whatever is the easiest you can get, great. And then whatever we have more time for, we'll have to do some kind of reasonableness test on how hard we make these departments work. And we want to be deferential to the administration has, a day job they got to do as well. But those are some of the things you may run into. I know Metro councils run into them when we've asked for data from the administration. Thank you.
And Earl, another timing issue that people have been sensitive about is COVID. And they want to make sure that if we don't use fiscal year 20 or 21 because it's going to be an outlier. Thankfully, we've waited long enough that we now have a lot of data for fiscal 22. So that's kind of post-pandemic. Some of these series, for example, occupational taxes, particularly property taxes, insurance premium taxes, I've looked at the history. There's not a blip. COVID didn't seem to affect those. We had to pay our property taxes anyway, didn't we? Whether you had a job or your business was closed or not. So it's not a factor there. Libraries is a big deal. The libraries were closed for much of COVID. So we're going to try to get very recent data from the libraries, say the last 6 months or something. And if we can, we'll get a before picture to see the service distribution for libraries. It's just going to be, each one's going to be different. Yep.
Is what it is, I guess. Anybody have any other questions for Mr. Kuhn?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, to have a, sorry, somebody left there.
May I?
Yeah, please.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to check because it seems like the study that we're looking for is really oversimplifying how revenue is being generated and then how services are being distributed. I want to make sure we're clear that we should also be looking at services that are needed. If we're not looking at the need, it doesn't tell the full picture of what we're actually staring at when it comes to the numbers. So I just wanted to make that comment real quick as we really get into this thing. Thank you.
Can I, Mr. Chairman, can I follow up on that? That's a good point. What I'm trying to struggle with is how you define need in terms of priority and what data is out there to determine that priority list so they can give them some direction. I don't doubt what you're saying, but I'm just trying to figure out how we can, what resources they can use in order to determine what those needs are and then how they prioritize.
So we have a data portal at Louisville Metro Government that's available by right. Actually, as of last year, we made sure that was something permanently available for the public. But in that data portal, example, our social programs are very clear on what zip codes receive services. And on the back end for us, as far as looking at data, we can see where the poverty is, where the pockets of poverty. And so based on who applies for things and who receives services, and some of the baseline data that we're comparing it to, it's kind of easy to track that need because we have the information because we serve the people.
And I would think, this is Jason Nemus, I would think that what Councilman Arthur has said is right. I think population density information is important. I think of something like a TARC, obviously that's going to be used more in an area where there's more people. And there are other things as well. And we're talking about capital projects. It's not going to go into our farmland areas of Louisville, but it's going to go more where there's more population and economic development. Roads, all those kinds of things. I don't know if you're comfortable, Mr. Coombs, that you have access to all this information. Is there anything we can help you with on talking to people to make sure that you have access to that? Councilman Arthur, I don't know if Mr. Coombs has the access to the database the data that you're referring to. If not, then that's one you need to get access to, I think.
We'll take a look at that, and if by need, to the extent to which it's related to poverty or socioeconomic conditions, Matt Ruther here is an expert at building it up from census data at the block level, tract level, and we can cut it up however you like. And we've already started doing that for some many indicators. There's sort of endless things you can measure related to housing and income and family structure and household characteristics that we've done quite a bit already, and so no problem to do more of that. That's what we do anyway.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, if I might, one of the reasons that we reached out to you is I think everyone on here has been associated with you in some way in the past and have a lot of trust in your judgment. I would ask that we be able to help shape. I don't know what need means. Need means something different to me than it does to Fleming, than it does to Arthur, and so forth and so on. But we would like for you to, I think, to use your judgment on a lot of things, but to give us the information, not at the end of the day, but in a way where we can say, hey, what about this? What do you mean by that? You didn't really consider this other thing over here. And so is that going to be possible for us to help shape that information and also to ask questions that we think are important for the people that we're representing?
So the logical way to proceed is we get the stuff that we can get as quick as we can, the good stuff, and start meeting with your committees and showing them drafts of things or summaries or patterns and get their reaction, right? And either they're going to go, oh, that's pretty clear, let's go on to something else, or they're going to say, hey, we need to look deeper here. That's what we do. We're researchers, so no problem. And then we'll just start having to watch the clock as we get into summer, and you all have to got a deadline. And then we'll really have to prioritize the questions. But I really believe over the course of, 4 or 5 months that we're all going to learn a tremendous amount, and it's going to induce a lot of good thoughts about policy. No one's ever done this.
Yeah, Anthony Piagentini again. Dr. Coombs, how hard, I mean, I think maybe you already said this and I wasn't hearing it the right way, but, if I can read the stitches on the fastball on what Councilman Arthur is saying, can we like overlap? I don't know how detailed, I mean, I'm not talking about like census tract maybe, but even higher level than that, right? Certainly USD versus non-USD, but even tighter than that, because in the USD, you have very different communities, very different economic circumstances, socioeconomic information. So is there some way to say, service, think revenue, expense, service, and overlay it by geography? Because that might, certainly you could say, well, if we look at the California neighborhood, right? And we're looking at income, service, expense, and then we're looking at, and I'll pick on Lake Forest, right? Looking at Lake Forest, 1, 2, 3, because we'll know via census data and such, demographic information, right? Certainly socioeconomic and that type, and plus naturally, we're going to know these communities. That might be a good help put into context, right? Why we're seeing different numbers from different regions of the city, income, services, expense, right? So that should be possible with the way you're slicing the data?
Sure. For example, there are police divisions, as you all know, inside the urban service district. I can't remember, there's 4 or 5 different fire districts. So they each have a budget and they each have data on runs. So, sure.
Thank you.
Can I follow up? You said that the committee should contact you. I guess I'm trying to understand what would be the schedule for that. In other words, how you need to let us know, for example, where you are at various points in time so that we can say, well, we should meet with you on a certain schedule. You're at a point where there's enough that we can comment on. How would you propose that be handled?
Well, we have, some preliminary things right now we could share, and give us a few more weeks and it'll be tighter and we'll have a few more things. So I would say whenever you want to start scheduling your subcommittee meetings or committee meetings, as you call them, just let's get on the calendar and we'll start briefing you and take it from there. And I don't know how intensely you guys want to get involved, but we can meet every 2 or 3 weeks, however you like. Speed up, slow down. That's why you hired a team of researchers, right? To meet with you and follow up on stuff. So we're flexible and ready to go. We have 2 other members of the team also that aren't here that are very technical in GIS and databases. So we're staffed up and ready to go. So it's just a matter of your sort of appetite for meeting and getting involved. I know you're all volunteers. So do you have a meeting schedule yet? I know we just I guess we got approved yesterday by Metro Council, so we're finally formally underway.
I think we'll have to discuss that further in this particular meeting today, but I don't think we have not agreed on schedules, at least we haven't at this body. Maybe the committees themselves have, but we haven't discussed that. We'll have to get into that a little later in this meeting. Anybody have any other questions?
I just have a comment. I just want to commend Paul for his work. He came to one of our tax committee meetings. I had some ideas and questions in my head, and he got me a full research paper on my question the next day. So I'm very excited to work with you, and I think, this is critical for the work that we're doing and getting this data. So I'm thankful for Metro Council for approving that, but I think we're going to have good work with this team.
I have to say, Shelby asked a fairly easy question to answer.
So
I actually had the data, and it didn't take but a couple hours to give her a good answer.
Mr. Chairman, one thing I think we should probably do is invite Mr. Coombs and his team to email us information that he has. But I also think we need to figure out how we're going to make that information available to the public. I don't know, and maybe one of the councilmen can answer this question, is that, I'm sure I can get it done at LRC if we can't get it done at the council or at the mayor's office, but is there a website that we can create where we have links to particular reports, particular data? How can we do that? I don't know. Jacory, do you want to take a stab at that first?
Yeah, we got one of the best data teams in the country, and they've received some of the highest ratings in years past. So we're more than capable of doing that. We could just host it on our data portal that we already have.
I wonder if we can create a website, Mr. Chairman, for this committee, if they can create a website for us where we can host that information.
Who would be is that the council itself creating an email, or is it is it an department of the city?
Simran.
CIP, very similar.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Mary Ann Butler, when we're talking about this website and putting stuff out there, are we talking about just putting out the raw data? Or are we talking about putting out a draft of the reports, or exactly what are we going to put on there? Because I think sometimes if you put out the raw data, someone can look at it and take it out of context.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, well, my assumption was that we were creating a space for the mission's use. But what's your view?
Didn't hear the last thing you said.
You need to speak a little closer to the mic.
Yep, sorry, I said, my assumption was we were creating a space for information to be provided to the commission at this point, and that the issue of whether or not there be a website or space for the community itself to view would be a separate question. But that was my view anyway. If the commissioners have a different view of that we should have something that's available for the general public now, we should discuss that. Otherwise, let's assume we're talking about something which is available to the commission members only. And then I'm assuming whether it's raw data or conclusions or observations would be appropriate or not, depending upon the nature of the data. Would you agree?
That sounds very reasonable to me. I think you call that a sandbox, basically a place to play, and we can keep it internal. And in each case of these different data silos that we're analyzing, we're writing little white papers that explain the source of the data, the characteristics, the patterns, et cetera. And we can put draft on it. And that way everybody has something they can get their teeth into soon, instead of waiting for us to polish it 3-4 months from now. If that's what you want, right?
Yes, I think my view is that would make sense, but if the rest of the commission is agreeable to that, we can say that's what we'll do. Argentini. That's all right. I'm sure it is. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just want to clarify this.
Yes?
Is this for internal use? When you say, what do you mean by internal? Among the committee members?
Correct.
Okay.
Among the commission members.
Okay.
Is that a concern?
No, I just, whenever we whatever my experience, and I've got confidence in the Dr. Coombs and team and so forth, you got to be very cautious and careful of the data being put out there. in terms of what narrative it's going, what the narrative is and so forth. And I believe in transparency and try to put things out there. But if we don't put some boundaries or parameters on this, it can get pretty unwieldy. I don't know if that's a good word or not, get unwieldy, even among us. Part of my thought is to, instead of, and I'm just thinking out loud here, and I'm not sold on it, but, if we can just, have each committee go through, and come up with, what we're trying to achieve, and then we can report back. And then if the committee agrees to, then we can go ahead and put something out there in terms of having displayed, and then go from there. I just want to make sure, that where we come up with is not going to be misconstrued or taken down a rabbit hole, in terms of what's going on. So and I'll do whatever the committee wants to do, but I just want to make sure we're mindful of that.
Well, I guess I'd say misconstrued by whom? By your fellow commissioners? By whom?
Yeah, it could be, we could misinterpret something and start, start discussing this in a different light, which that's not a true intent. I just want to make sure we stay in a cooperative group, so we can have a collaborative approach to whatever we come out with. We're trying to work it together as a group as much as possible.
Chair?
So I don't disagree with what's been said. I will note that I think we should maybe follow the spirit of the rules that have already been put into law, like the open records laws. So if it's preliminary data or reports, that's not public because it's preliminary. But I think we should get things to the public as soon as possible, just to make sure that there's no perceptions of misconduct. That won't be the truth, but there's no perceptions of that. Plus, there's a lot of people in the public who are watching this who will have good insight. And so the things like, I don't know the particular question you asked, Shelby, but if you ask the question of Mr. Coombs, and he answered it in a way that is not preliminary, but a definitive answer to that question, I don't know why that type of thing, and again, I don't know what the question is or what the answer is. I don't know why that might not be able to be given to the public. Here's what let me round it up and say this. When in doubt, let's make it public. If it's a preliminary report, data, raw data, okay, I understand that. That doesn't need to be made public immediately. I think at the end of the ballgame, everything needs to be made public. But while we're ongoing, to the extent that things can be relayed to the public, I think we need to do that. We're public actors in this commission, and I do think it will lead us to a better result.
Mr. Chair, not only do I agree as much transparency as possible, but even the raw data, not that the three gentlemen we have here are going to crush it on analyzing this data, but I have been blown away because of the data portal that we've got, how many organizations and members of the public who are just data nuts have sliced and diced that data in certain ways and come back to us and be like, hey, did you see it this way, right? And like, oh, wow, that's pretty interesting, right? So, think of it as like crowdsourcing, right? A little bit, putting the raw data. Now, I wouldn't put the raw data out there until it's been cleaned up. As Dr. Coombs was saying, get the data, there's gonna be gaps, clean it up and all that stuff. But once we have the raw data to where this is the raw data we're gonna use, I said put it out there, right? Because we're gonna use it in a certain way. Somebody else might come up with a great idea, build a better mousetrap, and if they want to throw that back at us, awesome. I don't know if I want to hold out until we're publishing the report to put the raw data out there. I'd rather put it out there when we can, so that, again, just the public has the ability to take a look at it and maybe come to similar, and also more interesting or different conclusions that we're coming up with. Thank you.
I mean, in my view, all these comments make sense, but at the end of the day, we need some kind of a clear understanding of what we're going to do here. I mean, I'm taking from what's been said, if I can interpret it, it's the data may go into a space where the commissioners have access to it until it's determined by the commissioners or the committees, depending on who's got, let's say, oversight of the particular information, that it's appropriate for further release. Now, I don't know how else you can do it. It's either all going to be open or it's all going to be closed until the decision is made that it's not. Now, that would seem to me to be the way that you might want to consider going. If the data is there to be looked at, then by the commission, then you, after you've reviewed the data, if you determine that it's appropriate for release, then it's released. If it's just raw data that is otherwise appropriate for release, I don't see a problem with releasing it either. But how are you going to make distinctions between what is to be released or not to be released unless it's got some kind of review by the commission? Or release it all?
Well, once again, Chairman, I'll go either way. It's fine. I mean, like I said, I just want to make sure that we're conscious of that. But you know, if we go down the path in terms of look at the raw data and then collectively we say, hey, this is pretty good data, or we need to get it out there, that's fine. I just want to bring it out. We don't need to really, I guess, you know, go back and forth about it. I just want to bring it up, and that's fine with me. Whether you know, the chairs want to do and the committee wants to do, that's fine.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Scott Schoenberger.
Yeah.
And again, I'll premise this by saying everything here is kind of new to me. But when we get ready for public hearings, wouldn't it be necessary to be able to have the information and the data out there to try and help formulate questions, provide direction, and because we're getting kind of to a narrow timeline to get that process started. And I think the information that we're providing can be helpful to the people that are on the subcommittees or on the commission and help provide some guidance and kind of a reference point to the citizens of the city. Just, and I ask this because I'm a novice at this.
My assumption was that indeed that would be the case. And that the only issue we're talking about here is whether or not the data is available as soon as it is loaded into this space, or whether it's being looked at and reviewed first. And that it should be made public as quickly as possible. And that's the responsibility of the commission itself and the committees to do that. Now, it does put, it does create a clear responsibility on the part of the commission members to review the data and to sort of make those decisions. Otherwise, and we can't be in a position where the failure to do so means the data isn't released, and we run into the problem that you're concerned about.
Yeah, I also would just say, I mean, obviously only one committee's met so far, so we need to get on that. But I think with the urgency, to be able, if it's going to be reviewed, and again, what does that process look like? Do the subcommittees go through it and then it comes up to the commission for review? Because we're 7 months out before we've got to get something published or get the recommendations completed. So there, in my estimate, would need to be a more frequency depending on what that determination is for us to get together and come to those conclusions. I'm just trying to keep the end in mind as it relates to what our deadlines are at this point.
Well, those are fair questions.
Mr. Chair, Councilman Arthur had a question. Sorry.
I can't see those.
Thank
Please,
you so much. I just wanted to offer something that might help us simplify this, and that's just to put the data out as soon as we can with our analysis, very simple analysis going along with that. So any part of town that generates a lot of revenue, somebody could look at that and argue, why am I not getting X services over here? But maybe that part of town has their own public works, for example. So obviously they might not get that service. Maybe the crime is significantly lower and maybe their policing looks different, or maybe they have their own police department. So I think putting the raw data out is important. And with that, we also put our analysis so people understand how to look at that data and they understand some simple truths about the way that our budget works and doesn't work.
Well, that makes sense. I'm just really trying to figure out, and as we all, I'm sure, how do we get to the point of making the judgment that it's time to be released, and what's the schedule for making those analyses so that it can be released? So it seems to me that the committee, this really is going to be on the committees then to step up and to create the schedules for the review of the data and then the decisions to release it. I don't think it needs to come back up to the full commission, in my view. I don't know whether you have a different view, Jason. So if the committees then are meeting and they're, for example, if the tax group is meeting and they're looking at the data that's now been, posted, come to some conclusion whether or not it's appropriate to be released, release it. I don't think they need to come up to the full group. Same thing on services and any analysis by the group that's focusing on gaps. I think we should, we can proceed in this way unless and until members of the commission or others determine that it's not working well. And I think we should probably make some kind of a call by a date certain to say whether or not this is appropriate and working or it isn't. And then we can change it.
Mr. Chair, I agree with that. I do want to say if we could admonish from the chairs that everything should be made public if there's a doubt. So the presumption is everything's going to be public, and then if you're going to keep something from being made public, there needs to be a reason for that. And I would think the reason would be insensitive, very sensitive information, which I don't foresee coming, or if something would be misleading because it's not complete, something of that nature. But the presumption their strong presumption should be that the information be available to our citizens.
Any comments following that? The co-chairs comments?
I had a couple, Earl. First of all, I believe all the quote unquote data or information that we're going to use is public to begin with. We're not going to be able, HIPAA, prevents us from even seeing the address of somebody being served by the police or the fire. So the only thing we're getting are things that are already publicly available. So I don't think there's any sensitivity there. And we just had a little huddle here. I think and you're exactly right about not releasing something that hasn't been cleaned up yet. That could create problems where you put out some data and then a week, 2 weeks later, you say, well, that's not it. It's really something else. We don't want that kind of confusion. But the distinction that we were making just now is between the data and the analysis of the data. What does it mean? What does it tell us? And we internally, we want to take one of these subjects, look at the data and give it our best analysis, and then have it reviewed on our team and have a report that says, this is what we think it means. Then we give that to you. And then you all have to decide if you think that's what it means and endorse it or ask us to look at it differently or say it means something else. That's your prerogative, right? So to me, that's the way the flow would go. I wouldn't worry so much about quote unquote data being released because it's all public anyway. It's a matter of the analysis of the data and maybe what data we looked at versus what data we failed to look at. Those kind of things will come up. That's fine. But I think the tension will be on the analysis of the data more than on the data itself.
Thank you for that. That's a very good clarification. So then
When I say that the data is all public, it's public, all right, but there's millions and millions of records that, that's a heavy lift for most people to sort it, clean it up, understand it, and chop it up in geography. So that's, the value that we're adding initially was just make it understandable. Then there's the analytical step. What does it tell us?
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I know the information is available, it's publicly available. Is there going to be anything like John Doe lives at this place, his house is worth this much, he's got a concealed carry, he has 3 kids, I mean, there's a judgment against him, so there's nothing like that?
Nothing
Okay.
like that.
So we need to protect the privacy of our
And things like,
individuals.
the property value of your home, the assessed value of your home, anybody can go on the PVA website today and look it up. And you can go to the sheriff's office website and look up their tax bill. So that's the kind of raw materials we'll be using. It's already publicly available. We're just going to aggregate it in ways that are useful for you.
Okay, so then it seems to me then it comes back to the committees who are going to be looking at the information that will be posted and with the responsibility then to review any conclusions or observations that Dr. Coombs and the teams are making to determine whether or not that is final enough, good enough, if you will, or final enough, or accurate enough, or appropriate enough to be released along with the raw data that's already, that would be released as well. So then, can we get back to a discussion now of the committees and talk about a schedule? Because I think we have to agree upon, or the committees have got to agree upon fixed schedules. Given the time we've got left, there isn't really, I think, focusing on time periods with which they need to meet, by which they need to be able to sort of come up with some conclusions needs to be determined, and we need to set a schedule to do that. Or my concern is that we might be all rushing at the end, and there'll be some disconnect between the information that Dr. Coombs and teams is presenting and our review of that same, any directions to him or any reaction to what he would be producing. Anybody have any concerns about agreeing upon specific schedules? Can the committees themselves get together and agree upon a meeting schedule, which they can then advise the rest of the commission regarding? And then as we indicated in the beginning, the 2 co-chairs would attend some of these meetings depending upon when they're scheduled and their interest.
Mr. Chair, I was talking to Shelby a few minutes ago about that. I think you're right. We need to have a little bit of sense of urgency and making sure, given our timeline on this, and I haven't talked to other members of the tax, but we're thinking about every 2 weeks for the tax folks to go through and look at this. That's the idea. When that one might happen, we don't know, but it to be a collective decision on what day we can do that. So my thought is every 2 weeks, at least for us. And I haven't talked. If anybody else is on the tax has a different consideration or thoughts, that's fine. I just want to throw that out there.
Co-chairs, I have a question. I assume either the gentleman that just spoke or one of you got together the tax group. I'm just curious if somebody wants to volunteer or you want to appoint somebody to kind of corral the other committees to get together.
Well, we can certainly do that. I think we know who the members of the committees are, right? So then maybe we can have discussions offline, the co-chair and I, about contacting them. We've got the emails. We'll just contact the groups and ask them, suggest maybe some times, or at least ask them to kind of get back with their proposal schedule for when they might meet. I think that may be the best thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think maybe when you told us to meet, I don't think anybody jumped up and said, "Hey, everybody, let's meet." And if you did and you made an attempt, I'm sorry, but I don't think anyone from our group did.
I wonder if to make it simpler, Earl, we could deputize
Body.
just somebody from each of these committees, say you're responsible, at least at first, to start the meeting.
We can certainly do that. Often that happens to the person who's not here, who's on that committee, but that would be unfair. So let's just review the 2 committees I think, outstanding at this point. One is services, and that's Striesbach, Jung, Arthur, Piagentini.
I'm
Right,
fine to
Mark.
get that group together.
I nominate Councilman Arthur to get that committee together.
Okay.
Second, aye.
I'll second that.
Just give me a call, Ja'Cory. I'll work with you on that.
The next group is the GAPS group, and that's Schoenberger, Adams, Stevenson, those three. Sorry. GAPS is Schoenberger, Adams, and Stevenson. Right.
Me. That's it. No, I'll take it. Go on ahead. I'll take it. You're welcome. Scott. Yes.
Now, actually, Ms. Fowler, I don't think you have a committee at this point. Tax, you're on tax, okay. Okay, right, there we go. Okay. So let's move on the agenda then. We were going to be talking about community meetings. Now, if we're, again, talking about a report due on, I think, September the 1st, it would seem to me that we'd need to have these meetings no later than the month of July. And presumably, in June, May, June, et cetera, might be the appropriate time, giving July some time for consideration of the inputs, et cetera, and some back and forth with Dr. Coombs and the committees to react to what we're hearing. Now, I did take the liberty of checking on potential high schools and asked the Metro Council, Mr. Powell, to contact some principals to check on the availability of their spaces. I'd like to just tell the commissions about those. Anybody have any suggestions, changes, additions, et cetera? Let's discuss that. These schools that have been contacted are PRP, Atherton, Ballard, and Southern. The effort was made to geographically disperse these around the county. And then for the 5th, since it is unlikely and the cost is prohibitive to have recordings or streaming in these locations, to have one location which would be available and streaming to the general public. And it might make sense to have that one here in Chambers, where those facilities are available as a matter of course. But that's something I think we should discuss. And if you all have any reaction to those proposals, I think now's the time to do that.
I think those are really good, Mr. Chairman. I'd say Ballard is good, Eastern is better, because it's in my district, but no, Ballard is fine. And I think the hub, using this as the hub is a good idea. But I do think, and Mr. Arthur maybe have a comment.
Okay.
We might want to have one more easy to get to from our citizens from downtown in the West End.
I was just going to ask about going to Central for our super inner city public gathering.
And Mr. Chair, if I might, if Central's not available, maybe the Y there on 18th Street, they've got a nice meeting room as well and adequate parking.
Mr. Chair, Valley High School also has a wonderful auditorium that is easily accessible from the outside. I'm not sure PRP's how their setup is, but, and that's in my district too, so, yeah.
Fairdale Library has a nice.
I think Valley might be the best for the south end because of that auditorium. That was made, yeah, I thought that.
Yeah, and the bus line as well, sir.
The best what?
Bus line.
Oh. Any other thoughts?
So, you know, if you live in J-Town, Fern Creek, there's not one that's really close to you. So I'm thinking maybe, sorry, Ken, I'm thinking maybe we should move it from Ballard to Eastern or maybe Ballard to J-Town. J-Town's kind of in a neighborhood, so Eastern probably would be better, but
Yeah, I mean, once you get, the problem is, once you get south, you get into J-Town, now you have the northeast, now you're getting much further from the northeast. If you were to say, like, draw a line from Fern Creek to the river, right, going up the east end, Eastern is the most central. I mean, Ballard isn't too bad, it's just north of Eastern, right, it's the northern third of it. So, but I mean, I think it's 6 to 1, half dozen to the other. I don't think, let's put it this way, I don't think it's, and Eastern has a great auditorium. I mean, it's got tons of parking. I think it's gonna be fine. I'm not a lean Eastern because it's in my district also, but I'm good with either. I mean, I don't think it's gonna.
I'm just thinking of the person from Fern Creek. They're not gonna go to they're less likely to go to Valley, so would they go to Ballard or Eastern? I don't know. Anyways, one of those areas. Because that's the big gap somebody lives in with the ones that we've chosen.
Excuse me, so are we not going to do something closer to the I-65 corridor with 265? Say it's Southern or, I don't know. I don't know how many, you all were planning on doing.
Well, I think the idea was 5 was the number that had been mentioned earlier. If there's a sense that it needs to be more than that, we can obviously discuss that. These will have to be done after hours. The commission will have to attend, and of course, the schools will have to be open, and which probably shouldn't be a problem most of the time, I would imagine. So your point was that.
I was just thinking, there's a big gap between Valley Station and, you were saying Eastern? Yeah, I mean, I was thinking possibly Southern High School at
Southern is on the
Preston.
list.
Oh, it is, I'm sorry. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, the proposal now with the changes that were suggested today are to go with Valley, Atherton, Eastern, Southern, Central, and then here in council. Plus Atherton, if I didn't mention that, I'm sure.
Mr. Chairman, if you have a problem getting to Eastern, which you shouldn't, you can use Crosby Middle School. You got parking all the way around it. It's inside my city. And I'm sure that we could get the huge cafeteria or something if you need to, but Eastern, if you can get that, that would be probably better.
Okay. Now, can we talk about dates? Now, some of this may depend upon when the schools are available, but let's assume that they are. We're looking at dates then in May and June. Is that agreeable? Anybody would prefer them to be at a different time frame?
This is Mary Ann Butler. I know for our colleagues on the council, they will be heavy into the budget season at that time. So I don't know how May might be a little easier. They'll be doing a lot of hearings.
Yeah.
So I don't know what our schedule will look like here as well. We'll have to work with the president's office on that as well. But just keep that in mind when you're scheduling stuff.
Mondays might be at a better date, don't you think? Mondays would be a better date, don't you think, a day of the week, because we normally don't meet Yeah, on Mondays.
Monday's preferred, and then try to avoid June because of the hearings and trying to confirm the budget. So that'll back it up into April. I don't know whether or not we're going to be in a position. I'll ask Dr. Coombs. Dr. Coombs, what's your sense of what you'd have available for the commission and for the general public in the month of April? That could be a basis for reaction by the community.
So we're talking March, 2.5 months from now to 3 months. I would say we will have lots of very large, compelling data sets and analyses that will give you lots to think about and talk about. And then, but I just know what's going to happen. Then we're going to say, well, what about X, Y, and Z that's somewhat related to that wasn't the critical center of the analysis, but people are going to want more. That's the way it always goes. But I think there'll be a lot of substance on your plate for you to think about and to share with people, and that it's very germane to the whole discussion of the big picture, which is how happy are we with merger, and is it working well, and is there anything we could do better, which I think is the context and the purpose here.
Now, of course, when we initially discussed this, we were thinking about 5 meetings, by the way. Now, I don't know whether or not, given what Dr. Coombs has just said, whether or not that's actually adequate. But what's your reaction to regarding the number of meetings that might be, let's say, appropriate? Yeah.
Or what was the purpose of having them so early?
Well, I guess we're trying to figure out how do we have meetings that have something to be discussed, really, but have enough time to take in the reaction, to either go back and gather more data, but certainly then to impact the ability of the commission to provide guidance to you in creating any final version or drafts of versions. That was really what it came down to. It's a question of to give the back and forth between the commission and you as the
Researchers. Yep.
Now, by the same token, it could be if we push this into July, then we'd have to have the meetings in a very tight time frame in pretty much early July, trying to leave whatever time we could for that purpose. But I think that would be kind of risky, but we can certainly do that.
Yeah, the whole timetable is squeezed for sure. To the extent that you have early sessions where people have partial information and a lot of opinions, I'm not sure what good that does you with a lot of people just feeling strongly about something that maybe none of us totally understand yet. The later you put it off, the more solid the information is going to be, and the more clear the questions and answers are going to be. And I think you'll get a higher quality discussion from the public that you're inviting to these meetings. And then your purpose, I guess, at that point of the meetings is not so much to see what the public wants to have more research on. That's kind of our job, right? It's more subjective things, how people feel about how mergers worked, given the fairly solid information that we've now been able to share with everybody. Now, my gut tells me July is better than May, but maybe I don't fully understand your process and what you have to do to write a report.
No, I think that makes sense. I guess my concern was that I don't think we want to be in a position that looks like take it or leave it. but that there might be a benefit to being able to at least show that after a review with citizens, there was additional consideration of X or Y. Now, it may be that if things are held in July, there'd still be August timeframe in order to do that. You just wouldn't be able to demonstrate that by any subsequent
Mr. Chairman,
hearings. Yes.
I agree with Mr. Combs. He's going to be running numbers and data, not addresses and people. When we go to the public, they're going to be running emotions. So I think the more specific data that we have to give them, then the less emotions they may be putting into their answers. Because if I can't fight the number that's there because it's a scientific number, then my emotions go out the window. However, all of us are going to have a different analogy of what we just read. And I think we as a commission have been charged to keep this in check and that we give the public the information. Once they receive it, there will be some passionate folks about some things. But having said that, we can take those passion of those folks and figure out if that's something that additionally needs to be looked at rather than just because I'm in an uproar over it. And I think maybe we're not pushing it too late. They're the experts, and I think July is really not a bad idea. You've got to look at May. Kids are finishing up school. How much is school going to be limited? They're going to be doing finals, and then May and June, you're going to be having graduation and parties and what have you. And the folks that are really interested are going to stick around in July to figure it out. So I kind of agree with them. I would rather wait and give them more solid information than to give them information to formulate an opinion.
Got it. Well, thank you. That makes sense. Okay, then, we'll focus on July unless there's some other consideration then. So we'll check with the schools, get what the schedules are for July, try to lock in dates during that time frame. Still proceeding on the assumption we're talking about 5 sessions. And yes, okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if the schools aren't there, because sometimes they use July to paint and do other things, we have many community centers, libraries that have big meeting rooms. Some of the small cities even have large meeting rooms. So if you're hitting a roadblock, contact me or Bonnie or Brian, and we can help give some alternatives.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we've gone through the agenda. Any other things you want to? Any other comments? Anything else anybody wants to cover? We don't, I guess, let's talk about our next meeting, which is, if we're following our normal pattern, that would be, yeah, yes, the 10th. Okay, we're adjourned. Yes.
Scott and Ja'Cory set up those meetings.